fresh best of 3 here, guys. In the bottom right, it is Reynor. And in the top left, we do have Harstem. So, this has been kind of an interesting development between these two. In the past, before about November 2022, it was very Reynor favored. Very much so. Reynor, you know, he kind of shot up quickly when he was allowed to play in DreamHacks again, because he actually played before they imposed the rule of the age limit, and then he became the age. So anyway, he shot up, right? His first performance, he got second to Cyril at Montreal. Almost made it to BlizzCon at the very, very last second. And then since that point, he's been one of the best players in the world. Maybe a couple of dips that I don't really remember, but just, you know, it's not really been a flash in the pan, has it? He has proven himself over and over again. So Harstem, not really being able to do so, never truly had the year of Harstem, is kind of having the years of improvement anyway, where you can kind of judge his improvement off of how often he beats Reynor. Now I know there's times where Reynor's not playing seriously, or maybe he's off racing, or just had a bad day. You know, for instance, his most recent loss to Harstem, people might be very eager to explain it away by saying, well, Reynor was sick. It's okay, sure. Reynor apparently was feeling good that day. I'm talking about Atlanta, so this is about a month ago. Reynor was not feeling very cautious about his chances in that second day. He actually was feeling okay, and yet he still got defeated by Harstem 3-1 as well. So, I don't know. I actually think it's kind of a funny metric. It's kind of a funny way of looking at things, but you can kind of look at it that way. Because I don't even think that Reynor was playing random, and any times that he lost to Harstem, it was always pure Zerg. So, since November 2022, Harstem has almost evened up the series score between these two. He still had a loss at 3-4 in matches against Reynor, 10-12 in games, but freaking close. For the expectation of both players in tournaments apart from each other, where do you think Reynor's going to place? Well, he could win it. Where do you think Harstem was going to place? Well, he could maybe on a good day get round of 8. The fact that they're so closely matched between the two is quite interesting. Some might also point to, well, there was a patch. Well, that's still, you know, this was back in 2022 that Harstem seemed to have figured something out in the PvZ meta that at least gave him a better chance versus Reynor. But I suppose the closest and most one-sided match yet did happen post patch of the Baneling nerf. So I'm sure there's also people who will eagerly excuse away that as well. But you choose on your own. I'm just saying, this is a surprisingly close match. So if you're thinking that Reynor is going to default win, you're putting all your points into that, I don't know. Maybe don't do that. Harstem is playing very well against Zerg recently, and particularly against Reynor. Now, Reynor's putting in more work, I think, than previously. He's not sick. He's really taken the disappointing loss at Atlanta, not just to Harstem, but just overall his placement at Atlanta quite seriously. And he is looking to do very well in Katowice, so his practice seems to have been improving. So maybe this will be a bop. We'll see. Harstem starting things off pretty standard with an Oracle opener, third base on the way, everything that Reynor does. No, Reynor also rather standard, does have, you know, later speed, but that's totally fine. Deflects the Oracle for the most parts, and will continue doing so. Has everything cautiously placed. Queens, Lings, another queen pops out actually in the main, so the Oracle really cannot escape. Tries to, fails at it. Second Oracle might be trying to open up a little bit of an opportunity, maybe down the south side, but it's still, no, can't even really do that. These queens still target the Oracle. This Oracle could actually escape up the north pretty easily. I say like the Oracle's like trapped, and there's just a buttload of space behind here, so never mind. Absolutely not trapped. Or some intentionally keeping it back just for some convenient scouting. Maybe eventually for some stasis trap shenanigans as well. But we are getting into a very gentlemanly PvZ right now. Harstem going into Forge and Twilight Council, getting into that Blink. That's what I'm looking and seeing, but that's not quite guaranteed yet. Just because there's 2 stalkers instead of 1 or 0. It's not guaranteed. And then we have the Oracle actually recalled. So it does look like Harstem was a little scared of losing that, trying to go up that north side. Still has 2 Oracles on the field. The healthy Oracles getting less healthy by the second as the Queens are on the warpath. Sporkbrella at the third as well, so no open opportunities for these Oracles. Now, it's not really, I think, ever expected for the Oracles to do a lot of damage against these top-tier Zergs, so Reynor and Serral for the most part, really. But, you know, you do usually see... You see the better Protoss games. That's the way I'll put it. You'll see the better Protoss chances, the more drones they get in the early game, I think. If Serral or Reynor lose 6 drones in the early game instead of just 1, you're already like, oh, Protoss is onto something. But if they lose only 1 or 0, then... I don't know, it seems set up the Zerg quite well, doesn't it? And if they kill any of the Oracles, that's even better. Fortunately for Harstem, that one does escape by the skin of its teeth. And it was not Blink. Glad I stopped before saying it, just because there's 2 Stalkers, you know, hardly anymore. It is Charge. Charge +1. Templar Archives on the way. Some really old yield standard PvZ into the Charge Archon phase. A little bit of a pressure forward right there, which unfortunately gets surrounded. I actually said it was going to be cute before I realized it was getting totally and utterly destroyed. Great focus fire there from Reynor. Almost got that weakened Oracle. But before this was totally destroyed, I kind of liked it because it could have made Reynor temporarily think that it was going to be an actual point of aggression. Not a straight up attack, but just kind of one of those like little pokes forward of Blink Stalkers. It absolutely wasn't. It is absolutely Charge, which I think Reynor is only really just confirming now. The Overlord had died at some point, well, to the Stalkers, that's right. So I don't believe he saw the Charge warp-ins. That's not it's too important. I mean, it kind of is if those roaches were 15 seconds later. Then I'd be very concerned, but apparently even without that +1 melee and without roaches, this is not a concern. I actually think that this little screen cap like 10 seconds ago was supposed to be a good situation for Harstem. Somehow it just turned so freaking bad. So it was prior to +1 melee being done. It was prior to roaches being out, much less Ravagers. It was Charge Lot Archon up against Pure Ling Queen. But the Charge Lots weren't hefty enough in numbers. They charged forward without the Archons, got completely surrounded, and then the Archons were left all alone. So I actually think that was supposed to be a good moment for Harstem, and then it just kind of was the perfect sequence of bad timings that made that look like absolutely nothing. And Reynor isn't distraught over making roaches, by the way. You know, if this was earlier on, you could at least throw out like, well, Reynor's capped on 60 drones now. No, he was ready to make army regardless. So now he's just going to get maxed out while also getting his upgrades, while also getting to his hive, while also having pretty good creep spread, no form of harassment bothering him. And Harstem is, of course, going to have to play a very defensive Protoss game. We didn't expect too much different, but if that Archon charge attack had hit as powerfully as one would hope, I think we'd be talking a little bit more of a back and forth, a little bit more of wasted resources from Reynor, and instead, it really seems like Reynor is in control of the game. Doesn't mean he's going to win it, but he really has not much to worry about. He can focus on all of his plans, so going for the Overlord drop of Banelings, going for potentially Greater Spire while not fearing being dead before he gets there, because Harstem is going to be building up still. Now, Harstem didn't sacrifice a lot. I guess I should also throw that out there. This is why I'm saying Reynor has charge of the game, but he's not going to win it easy peasy. Because Harstem didn't really lose a lot there either. He was going on to his 4th base. He lost charge lots on Archons. The Warp Prism even lived, so it wasn't the worst thing, but it really felt like it was supposed to be a better moment. And now it's entirely about the defense. Harstem needs to be very careful. Excellent use of the Changeling to pop that Stasis Trap. His army is away from static defense. Not that there's any at the 3rd or 4th, rather. 1 shield battery is hardly enough, I think. Looking for aggressively placed storms, kind of nip the attack in the bud is good, but then you might get surrounded, which is bad. Harstem supply really does not look bad at all, though. Only down by about 20. Just doesn't look like it right now. Stasis traps continue to be popped. Reynor recognizing where they would be placed. The Ling run-by is being denied. Overlord drop being denied, excuse me. I think an observer or something flew over and saw the Overlord at the exact time. Oh, the Overlord drop just got killed. Either trying to jump on top of the High Templars or trying to go to the 3rd base. Either way, that is gone. Now it is the main attack only. Stalkers warping in really to protect the... well, probe line and shield battery, but unsuccessful in both. Probes barely surviving thanks to that upgrade change. Thank you, patch. If the entire probe line went down, that's still not the worst thing, honestly, because the army's still intact. So producing, 20 probes again off of 4 base is not the is not impossible. But Ling run-bys will continue until morale improves. And the Oracles can only do so much. Greater Spire is on the way, but certainly not done. No Corrupt return to Broodlords. Harstem does have a very powerful army. Reynor remaxing very quickly. He just doesn't have as good of an army unless things go swimmingly for him. So for instance, getting all of these High Templars destroyed would be the first thing to do. And not happening so far as the War Prism also going to tuck itself into a very safe location. Where the heck are the Queens? Coming forward now to try and snipe that. Corrosive Bile also coming down, but missing actually. And the War Prism will safely evacuate the High Templars. However, the High Templars kind of devoid of storms towards the later half of that battle. The Roaches and Ravagers did take out the Zealots and the Archons, and Harstem is forced to flee. Now Harstem is fleeing back to a remade economy and a lot more charge lot reinforcements, so an immediate counter from Reynor is not going to win the game. But once again, bad news for Harstem, as he is forced to be entirely on the defensive, as this time Reynor actually has that kind of ace up his sleeve. It's no longer about maxed out Zerg army versus maybe maxed out Protoss. Protoss army gets better, right, quality-wise, so if it's matching the quantity, that's a disturbing situation for the Zerg. No, it's about Broodlords versus a Protoss army that can't do shit about it. And the Broodlords are about to arrive, 6 of them producing in a safe area, as Reynor is also entirely maxed out, has at least some defense against Harstem's potential push, and Harstem is kind of SOL here. He has no way of moving over into Fleet Beacon very quickly, although he could at least start it. He has no blink, although it has started again that as well, to even try and jump on top of Broodlords, and even then, it's not a very reliable way of dealing with them. So Reynor has done kind of everything he has to do in this game to win. It's been kind of a textbook PvZ Charge Archon versus Ling Baneling Roach Ravager, and sometimes that ends with the Roach Ravager just overwhelming, sometimes that ends with the Protoss defending and then counterattacking immediately. All of those things could have happened, did not. So it's really the textbook beginning to end for the Zerg, the end being Broodlords against no amount of Tempest or Carriers. It's kind of the end of the Protoss, honestly. The Broodlords are kind of away from any defense, but the Stalkers weren't built yet, and they still don't have Blink, so they can't jump on top of the Broodlords. It's a very sad ending, actually. Like, I want to hype it up and be like, well, you know, maybe Harstem will base trade, right? Yeah. He would have had to initiate that base trade a lot sooner. The Broodlords are literally tracking his attempt to base trade, which is unideal. Probes are going down to the 4th base. Harstem never got to a 5th. Harstem has yet to touch Reynor's economy, which totally intact. Also has a big bank. You'd also have to destroy the technology of the Zerg to really have a chance, I think. And, well, that was not even an A move right there, so that is game. GG. Reynor, with, as I was saying, a textbook PvZ win right there. Doesn't get much standard than that. Much more standard than that. Does this sound low for anyone else? Maybe it's just me. In the bottom left of game 2 on Alcyone, we do have Basilisk's Reynor. In the top right, it is Shopify Rebellion's Harstem. If you opened up the dictionary and looked for the definition of typical ZVP, that would have been it. It was without any shock or awe, honestly. There are some exciting non-deaths, as the Oracles, you know, barely avoided dying. That's great, sure, but that was pretty much the most exciting part we got. Otherwise, soup to nuts, as my dad would say. Pretty typical. Pacing, macro, the micro, the decision-making, the ebb and flow. Typical. And I'm avoiding using the word, but let's be real, pretty boring. Not the most exciting ZVP we've ever seen. Especially if you do, you know the game, I guess. And not by, like, if you even know the game. Not even in that way, but just, like, if you have watched an okay amount of StarCraft, I think you've all seen how that plays out. Yeah. Anywho, so hopefully this is a little bit different. Harstem has had a couple of really great series versus Reynor, as I was discussing in the first half of that last game. But then I also know they've had some really interesting games. It's not just typical back and forth, okay, that guy got the win and, you know, let's move on. There are a couple of really great base trades in Atlanta and in Home Stray Cup, I want to say as well. A couple of, you know, slap your forehead type moments, which, while not great for the player, makes for more entertaining broadcasts in the Home Story Cup series, I believe. So it could definitely be more fun than that. But in the grand scheme of things, I would describe Harstem as a macro player, despite his PvP. His PvP is just an outlier. He's a macro player. And so we don't expect a lot of really curveball, cheeses, all-ins, or even decision-making like we would expect from an Estrella, certainly, or a Skilless, even, who definitely can throw in a couple of very aggressive... Maybe not charge all-ins, but I think I even saw him do a 2-base stalker all-in recently. Or maybe that was Estrella, actually. No, that was Estrella. Maybe I'm just thinking of Estrella. Estrella is the weird guy. Which, in some cases, can be a good thing. Some cases, a bad thing, right? Estrella has done some weird shit and then just totally fallen on his face, and everyone points and laughs. And then when he, you know, does a roll out of it and then lands on his feet, everyone claps. We've seen Harstem win really just clean, great PvZs, which in, I think, a different circumstance than last game, just, you know, him winning, for instance, but a little more of an exciting counterattack, right? We get to actually be excited when we're just like, oh, okay, shit, this Protoss is playing really, really good. But Harstem's last game was really just textbook. Nothing particularly shocking and exciting about even the good moments, because he really did play it very typically, not wrongly or incorrectly, just not enough splash. And this is kind of a weird situation. Looks like he walled incorrectly. I guess Harstem did do something wrong last game, didn't he? And that was the timing of that Zealot Archon attack, which didn't end the game for him, but really did not set him up well. And this is probably not as bad as that, because Reynor isn't Ling Bailing all-inning him, but this is not a correct wall. I'm not a Protoss. I'm not, you know, official Protoss commentator either, honestly, but that's wrong. It's always funny, because these guys play so many freaking games that you expect them not to mess this up, but on a map that's now been played a bajillion times. Doesn't matter. Does not matter if you're not being all-in. I actually think we do have Blink on the way this time, by the way. So what's nice about the two stalkers in the last game is that they kind of set up Reynor to not anticipate what's happening in the second game, necessarily. He's like, oh, two stalkers again? Well, that could be charge. But the reason I was calling Blink is because there was no Forge this time around. And you basically don't do any type of 3-base, Forgeless charge. I mean, no, there must be. Actually, there definitely is one. But I guess more recently, this would be the most common thing after a no Forge. Would be Blink. But there's definitely got to be a Forgeless charge Archon attack that's just old at this point. Anywho, so it is Blink. I'm right about that. And Rotorn is on the way. +1 melee is on the way. Reynor was already doing that all in the last game. Nothing has to change in that regard here. You have to make sure that if they are all-inning you, surprisingly, you have units. But it's not an all-in. It is going to be more dedicated pressure. So Harstem, you know, he set up those two stalkers last game. So this time around, Reynor can't really read into that. Then Harstem also did what ended up being a bad move out because he got surrounded, but it was a fake out anyway. It was two stalkers and two adepts, so it doesn't really supposed to do anything. But it kind of could have faked Reynor out and him being like, oh shit, like, yeah, god, units. And it didn't really. But now it really is a stalker attack. So this is the exact scenario I was describing could have been the case last game. So the Stalkers aren't accompanied by a proxy gateway, they're not accompanied by a warp prism, but they're accompanied by their micro and the oracles. And the oracles with pulsar beam and stasis trap usually stop these Stalkers from ever being surrounded. Now, Ling Run By could kind of ruin things, and actually this is still a downside of this incorrect wall. The amount of surface area available on the buildings is pretty extreme. So Harstem has to react to this much stronger than he would have liked, which if it wasn't the case of the gateway and some X-Core being so vulnerable, Zealot was there, you could just, you know, warp in 2 Zealots, not 5, maybe even continue harassing with your Zealots, Stalkers. We are moving over into Zealots, I think, at some point, but Charge is yet to start. So these Zealots are looking really silly as they slow walk their way after a couple of speedlings. But Charge, you know, eventually. Forge is also finally down, starting up that +1 attack. Templar Archive's also down. I saw that. It is in the natural. Archons could be added in, but this has turned into a very odd game. Harstem has lost the pacing. He's lost the control. And again, not a devastating game for Harstem, especially because the Lings did not end up running by into the natural. It doesn't bode well. It's still very similar to the last game, I would say. Reynor's going for a much faster Spire this time. No Infestation Pit, no Hive. He is actually going into Mutas, looking to overwhelm his opponent. And that could work. I mean, Blink sets you up a little bit nicer for dealing with Mutas than Zealot Archon, I guess. Kind of depends on when the Mutas come out, though. But, yeah, Blink Archon is better. Stalkers shoot up. Archon's great. Place one in every mineral line. Mineral line won't be harassed. But then, the real kicker about this style of play that Reynor's going to be using is the big attack on the front lines. The big Ling, Baneling, Roach, Ravager attack. That if it finds you a little too spread out, because you are deflecting Mutas left, right, and center, you just get overwhelmed. That's the real kicker here. And Reynor just has so much room to play. This creep spread, the bases, the economy, 86 drones. I mean, Harstem's on 83 workers, 4 bases. He's got a really lovely wall, the 4th base too, love it. He's got some static defense. He is playing totally defensively. He might even be a little wary of the possibility of Mutas in a game like this, but Reynor has all the control. Now, if Harstem defends everything and then counterattacks and wins, I'll call this a super impressive game. Because even though so far it's kind of textbook for this style of play as well, I think it's just more exciting. Mutas distracting, harassing, controlling, blah, blah, blah. And then the Protoss desperately trying to balance the defense of the Mutas with the potential defense of a huge attack is just much more exciting to me. Now, the Mutas are really just a distraction. In fact, so not invested into that Harstem only really has to worry about the front attack. Now, he doesn't know this quite yet, but the more that he sees only Mutas, the more that he's going to pick up on it. But he really has set himself up really well. I mean, as soon as he actually confirmed it was Mutas, more static defense, I think is totally called for, especially because he can afford it. His army supply is really quite good, even though it's not maxed out. If it's in proper placement and storms hit and all that good stuff, it's fine. So you can spend some of your resources on static defense, on upgrades, more so than you have to just panic, try and get maxed. So it's just a wise Protoss we're seeing right now. One who is not being overwhelmed by the mere thought of what Reynor could do. Good split. That's a lot of storms, and they will survive with all those Archons protecting them on the front lines. Stalkers warp in to block out those Banelings from the probes. So far, excellent defense, but the Banelings finally taking advantage of that awkward wall right there, depowering everything in the natural, and those poor probes, they need to keep on running. Some of them will survive thanks to that lack of +2 one-shots, and the Mutas in the main will be cleaned up as well. Overall, successful deflection of the Zerg attack. Harstem only dipping down to about 170. It pretty much didn't dip at all at that point, right? The dip was from the probe kills, and a very small dip at that. 4 Nexus will replace 11 probes pretty freaking quickly. But Reynor, not a fool to think that that was necessarily going to win the game easy peasy. Had a bank, had a remax, and has plan B, which is going to be that Greater Spire. The difference is that Harstem's counterattack, I think, is actually stronger than the last one. The last game's counter, when he was also maxed out with Storm, Archon, upgraded Zealots, all that good stuff, it was good. It's always scary. But then the positioning and the Storm usage didn't really work out for him. I think that this has a chance to be improved upon, I guess. I'm hoping that they'll go even better than the last game and still be hitting prior to the Broodlords as well. He's a little shy to move out. Can't blame him. Wanted to wait for that Warp Prism, but then forgot to re-wall the natural. A huge moment for Reynor. It actually is not so much about the damage that these Lings will do with crackling about 20 seconds away from finishing. It's about the time delay. Reynor just bought so much time, got rid of supply, and now can fill it with Broodlords. He's going to cancel +3 attack as well, and things just went from really promising to really meh, really quickly. Warp Prism tries to go for some harassment, but Reynor only using the Lings for harassment, has plenty of Baneling. Roach Ravager back at home to deflect this. And Harstem is now trying to catch Reynor by surprise. Might still be able to, actually. This might still work. It's a lot of creeps here to go through, and a lot of vulnerabilities to a surround, but this could work. Am I a believer? Kind of. High Templars dragging behind by quite a bit, though. I guess they're on a different hotkey. Nexus almost canceled, not quite. Might be killed later on. Big attack on the front lines. Archon's looking to tank all of those Banelings. Storm's coming in a little bit late, but protected, that's for sure. They weren't even a part of the fight, so they're not going to die, right? That's the good news. Maybe they could have been there a little bit faster, and that would have gone even better for Harstem, who unfortunately, ultimately, was still stopped short of really digging into the Zerg there. No bases killed, no drones killed, not enough army killed, because Reynor could still remax, and the Broodlords are now out, so that is the main problem. Had Harstem been able to move out when he wanted to, there's no way the Broodlords would have been here. When he wanted to, if the Ling run-by did not happen, he would have had that attack in the middle that we just saw, and then some, because the Broodlords wouldn't be scaring him away. It is what it is, though, and Harstem is going to get bopped by the Broodlord transition yet again by the looks of things. He does have Blink this time. When you start off with Blink, you have Blink for Broodlords. That is true, but you don't really want to be depending on Blink to deal with Broodlords. Reynor is in full control of game number 2. He's got a supply lead, he's got a technology lead, he's got an economy lead, and he might even have an upgrade lead at this point. Not quite. He's not exactly been super upgrade heavy despite killing Harstem's, and Harstem even replaced his Forge with double, which I like. I don't know if it's going to work against Broodlords. Harstem really not wanting to play the Fleet Beacon game, by the way. You know, there's a lot of Protosses who absolutely would have done that move out, but then also been grabbing at least a Fleet Beacon. If not a Fleet Beacon and 1 or 2 more Stargates. And Harstem just didn't want to do that. Obviously, you have more resources then to commit to the attack, but even as we really get to a point in which most Protosses would say, I need Tempests, you still have no Fleet Beacon. Reynor's running around with Ling Baneling trying to find open opportunities while Harstem sharks in the middle of the map, hoping to find a good fight despite having nothing great against the Broodlords. I mean, that's a lot of cotton balls right there. That is 13 Archons in total for Harstem, so that's a lot of Broodlings that are going to die uselessly trying to attack into it. But they still create a wall. And as soon as the Stalkers try and run in, blink in underneath the Broodlords, that's when the rest of the army comes forward. Ling, Baneling, Roach Ravager, Cracklings now as well, by the way, and Infestors with Fungal. Harstem's really hoping that Reynor will make a mistake with the positioning by the looks of things. But Reynor is perhaps thinking about some of the previous games he's played against Harstem. He's not trying to be aggressive with the Broodlords and dive to the middle of the map to try and win the game. He's actually playing quite cautiously. Not looking to exchange this game out in a wild base trade, but actually to just tie it up nice and neat with a 2-0. And we got Storms, we got Fungals, that's a big Fungal, and a follow-up Fungal on the High Templars, exactly what a Zerg wants. Every single High Templar going down right there. Now, Reynor does lose a Hatcher at the same time to a Zealot Archon run-by, but he can replace that pretty freaking easily. There really have not been a lot of fights in this game, honestly. The resources lost is even between the two. Not a good sign for the Protoss. And Reynor has a huge bank, so replacing hatcheries is not... It's not even a concern right now, to be honest. He still has 3 bases mining pretty strong, so if he takes his time getting the base back, it's not an issue. Archon's finally getting destroyed too. A run-by. It did its job, and it even saves most of the important units, so it's overall a good thing. Bought some time as well, but Harstem still has... I'm really wondering what his endgame solution is. And I think it honestly is just to base trade Reynor. I didn't catch all of their games, honestly. Any of their series, all of the games. I caught them here and there, so maybe there was one in which Reynor got to Broodlords and Harstem was able to overwhelm him or base trade him, but... If that was the case, and that's why Harstem won a couple of games previously, not happening here. Not happening. Reynor playing perhaps more cautiously than you would expect from the young gun, but in a good way, and now is actually finally going for the direct push. And Broodlords are so much speedier. Hey. Yeah, now he's like, okay, I can do this. There's no chance that Harstem has anything up his sleeve. There is a second army kind of coming in on the backside looking for some type of surround, but I gotta tell you, Archons really aren't like the coolest thing to surround air units. It is going to be the best possible fight because of this pseudo surround, for sure. And it's actually a really good fight. Hot damn. Hot damn! Is it enough? Is it enough? Is always the question. I don't know. Reynor did get his ground army depleted. Ling Ultra for the most part in that fight, I believe, running into a ramp of Archon Immortal Stalker. Yeah, the ground army died. Then the Broodlords were left majority alone, so the Archons are taking care of the Broodlings. Stalkers were actually able to jump on forward. That is the magical moment that a Protoss would love to have every time they face that late-game Zerg army. The problem is that you do not get that opportunity more than once, I would say. Reynor was missing the ingredients. He had lost the ingredients over time in that battle, so it ended up looking really easy, but it's not. It's gonna be the next time he tries to blink in like that, the Stalkers blink into a Fungal, or they blink into a Blinding Cloud, or they blink into Banelings. And it's gonna go really, really, really poorly. This must have been how Harstem was able to trip up Reynor. Not that I'm saying that Harstem has to rely on tricks, but more so that Harstem's particular brand of PvZ is probably different than other Protosses, because other Protoss struggle more often versus Reynor in the last 2 years, weirdly enough. And that might be what trips Reynor up, but Reynor is really, I think, just peering into Harstem's soul and figuring out his true intentions, you know? And despite no solid scout into the main in recent memory, I think Reynor has really picked up on this idea that he is not going to go into a slow, stalematey PvZ air versus air game. This is about overwhelming him and stopping him from ever finding the ideal moment, the ideal battle into the ideal counterattack. The ideal battle happened, but wasn't enough to actually counterattack. Reynor had remaxed safely before Harstem even thought about moving across the map, in which he actually never ended up doing. He's been entirely on the defensive. That was a pretty good storm. That was an efficient use of Archons right there. Tons of deadlings, and Reynor's bank is looking drier, but still at 3,000, 3,000. It's not the worst case scenario. It is one of those things, though, that's with Harstem still on mining bases, not many, mind you, but still on mining bases. A Zerg player should feel appropriately concerned when they don't have an endless bank. I know that sounds extreme. You know, like Zergs can never move out if they don't have 10,000, 10,000. Not exactly, but when Reynor moves out and has another poor fight in the middle right here, and he has 2,000, 2,000 instead of 5,000, 5,000, then he actually he does have to worry, yes. The name of the game, even as you get to usually a more cost-efficient type of army with the amount of Broodlords we're seeing here, is overpowering your opponent while your opponent tries to outlast you. So that's Zerg, right? But the thing is that these Broodlords should be more cost efficient against the ground army, so we're not seeing a dramatic difference in resources lost. And again, some of the battles from earlier, not the most devastating. But Broodlord's not involved in this particular fight, so the Ultras are getting popped. They are able to exchange a little bit in this battle, so I wouldn't call it a straight-up loss for the Ultras, but that was a more efficient fight for the Protoss than you might expect on creep on Zerg's side of the map. And the Ultras really only were able to be so effective because they got a couple of transfuses from the Queens. Now the transfuses are almost gone. Last Ultra not going to stand up against the might of the run-by, and Harstem really making me eat my words here. I have no understanding as to why Reynor has been playing a bit more cautiously than he would against, I would say, a Showtime or something. This guy is determined to avoid direct confrontation until the prime moment is possible. Reynor is very close to a perfect anti-ground army now that he's included the Vipers as well for blinding clouds and anything that tries to touch the Broodlings. He's also continued to upgrade as well, and his upgrades were never very impressive. So now they are actually really impressive since, 6 minutes ago when I checked. +3 attack, +3 shields for the Protoss, no armor, and no air upgrades, of course. But then Reynor has +3 melee with cracklings. He's got that on the Broodlings as well, not crackling, but +3 melee. And he also has +3 flyer attack, so the projectile portion of the Broodlings also hurts a decent amount. And +1 Carapace, moving on to +2 for the air too, just in case they do get blinked upon or hit by an Archon or something. Harstem has definitely given the late game Zerg more of a fight than I was expecting. Perhaps more than Reynor was expecting. I think when he did move out into the open field here, he was expecting a game over moment. So, can't blame him. That was a kill, not a cancel, by the way, and Harstem can't really be affording to just lose 400 minerals. Also a good fungal there on top of the High Templars once again. They're throwing on the Storms while they got him, but it's Storms on top of Ultra. It's not the most effective thing in the world there. They want more Immortals packing a punch behind the thick layer of Archon Zealot. That would be most ideal. Or the rest of the Protoss army. Here we go. Protoss army coming in, getting this around on the Ultras, and ultimately the Immortal and 2 Archons will survive, making that exchange actually super poor for the Ultras. I mean, that turned into a bit of a disaster, honestly. It was like 6 Ultras. Reynor perhaps being a bit too cavalier with the Ultras, honestly. I mean, he's using them to try and get his own moment, his own movement and mobility on the map so that he can also continue to tear down Harstem's bases and maybe catch run-bys as well, easier than the Broodlords can. And try and get his own surrounds on Protoss armies that are out and about. But it's been happening in the reverse. Harstem's been catching the Ultra army a little too shy of units, a little too independent of the rest of the Zerg forces and getting surrounds on them and whatnot. So, Reynor, he's finally straight up losing in the resources lost. They've been neck and neck for most of this game. It's only by 3,000, which is still not the most impressive PvZ ever, but it's also kind of, I guess, the PvZ that these two are playing in particular, not super, super, super entrenched warfare. But Reynor is also now out of a bank. And I was saying he should be concerned when he had 2,000. He should be very concerned when he's at 600, 200. That's almost nothing. Honestly, that's not even a bank. We don't even call that a bank. Harstem managing to avoid the Broodlords until the right moment to take an engagement, took the right engagement, then once again managed to avoid the Broodlords to look for the right engagement. And the right engagement is going to be when Reynor is feeling more desperate than ever in this game. So he has to pull the trigger. Which means this might not be a bad idea, but Reynor's probably also doing it because he realizes he needs to do something, and that's just not the position you want to be in as a StarCraft player. Going, oh shit, I need to do something. And while the Broodlings attack the right side, Harstem expands to the left. And after so many lost Ultras in this game, Reynor's understandably shy about engaging here. Lovely Neural Parasites, though. That's the way to do it. The Neural Parasites on top of the Immortals, taking away the power of the anti-Ultra, and that'll actually be it. Wait, you play 25 minutes of neck-and-neck PvZ and Neural Parasite? Is what finally ends it? I mean, he was going to lose an entire army. I'm not saying he's wrong. It just is kind of like... I was starting to really believe in the comeback, and that's exactly when the comeback was cut out from under us. Okay, then. Womp womp. That is it. Reynor will 2-0.